Matt Hancock, the UK Secretary for Health, the Health Secretary, the guy that's in charge of planning for all health-related matters during this pandemic, has been caught having an affair and breaching social distancing rules. When a story like this happens at a heightened time where we're all concerned about regulations around the pandemic, when people are mistrustful of government in general, suspicious around the kind of laws, a moral and ethical story like this one quickly snowballs and garners a lot of attention. When I look at something like this, I think, well, Matt Hancock's just a human being. He's a human being with a family and children. And when something like this happens, an extramarital matter, one could say it's part of his and his family's private life, and certainly that's true, and I'm reliably informed in other European nations that people sort of look favourably or are indifferent to personal matters such as that, extramarital affairs, infidelity, adultery, that kind of stuff, and say, well, as long as they're doing a good job, who cares? And perhaps that's true. If someone is doing a good job, perhaps their private life and their ethical and moral conduct is nobody else's business. That's possibly true, but I suppose the story of Matt Hancock during the pandemic has been an interesting one. I'm not a person who scrutinises politics because I frankly find it difficult to observe, and it makes me a little bit bilious from time to time. But I first became aware of Matt Hancock because I feel like he was awarding contracts to people that he was affiliated with, giving contracts for PPE and stuff to friends. Then when Dominic Cummings made those revelations that Boris Johnson had referred to him as inept and or more explicitly and verbatim, fucking useless. And now the breach of social distancing rules and the extramarital affair, because it's sort of one event, he's been caught on camera. Now I suppose what is at the pinnacle, the nexus, the nub of this issue is the idea that people in power make rules that they themselves don't follow. This issue exemplifies that. It's a wonderful epitome of it, and it's got a salacious undercurrent, but it's such a perfect exemplar of something I think a lot of us feel. We are governed by people that don't live to the ethical standard that is legally imposed upon us. I hold two views simultaneously. How sad for Matt Hancock's wife, for the partner of the other person involved in this matter. How sad that children will be affected. Those things are, I suppose, moral, ethical issues that we can look upon. In a sense, we don't want to operate on the same vibrational frequency that these people appear to. We have an obligation to regard things with a degree of compassion and acceptance. But where we must be discerning is when looking at the manner in which we are governed and the type of characters that govern us. Perhaps it's a greater transgression that social distancing laws were being breached than marital vows being broken. In any event, it feels to me like these kind of characters that are in government, and I don't think that they are particularly anomalous in governmental history in this country or any other. I feel that these types of systems of government attract a particular type of person, and the exceptions to that rule, people that are kind of selfish, operating on the basis of appetite, individualism, what are the underlying values that are indicated by this type of conduct, by the type of policies, by the type of hypocrisy we've seen elsewhere? What are the values, the emotional values? I think sometimes we can be distracted by the bureaucracy and the argot of politics. Oh, the kind of difficult and dense language that operates in these spaces. But all government, all systems of sovereignty, all systems that impose power on you, and as I've said many times on this channel, any law, any rule is backed ultimately by the threat of violence, i.e. if you don't obey regulations around COVID consistently enough, you're going to end up in prison. If you resist, go to prison, violence. So, you know, like, what is behind the regulations that we are expected to obey is implicit violent threat. That's what backs up law and order. So when people exempt themselves from the kind of authority that they impose while imposing it, that's difficult. I suppose more than reaching a kind of easy, somewhat glib conclusion like, oh, well, these people are hypocrites, we can dispense with them. I would go a little further and say this system in itself is a problem, because you can't endow people with that amount of power. Nobody is exempt from occasional hypocrisy. No one is exempt from fallibility. That's what human beings are. But I think when something like this happens, we're so resentful of the inequalities. We're so resentful of the dishonesty. We're so resentful of the corruption that there's almost a burgeoning sense of, see, we can't trust them. These people, they're selling moody PPE. They're making money on the side. They even think each other are hopeless. What a ridiculous sham. What this episode reveals is the hopelessness of our entire governmental system. You can't concentrate power like that. You can't expect people to live by that kind of ethical standard. Some people would say, yes, you can, Russell. You can expect people to observe their marriage vows. You can expect people to observe the very laws and regulations they make. And perhaps that's true. Perhaps that is true. But it keeps happening, doesn't it? Stuff like this. You know, do you think really that Matt Hancock is any different from people in the cabinet in the current Democratic Party government in America? Do you think he's any different? I'm not suggesting these people are having extramarital affairs, but I think it's pretty clear that social distancing laws are largely ignored, whether it's the UEFA story of 2,500 UEFA officials, have a look at that video we did on that, coming over, or the kind of stuff you saw, the California governor holding parties where people are coming. What is different here is we're not talking about a celebrity, we're talking about a person who makes policies, then breaks those policies. Should Matt Hancock resign? Probably. Will that solve the problem? Certainly not. Would it matter if we had a whole new set of individuals operating within this system? Not really. What's required is a new set of ethics and principles that we can all agree on. Our repugnance at events like this reveals something to us. We aspire to something better. Perhaps deep down we're not cynical. Perhaps deep down we don't think, oh, well, you can't trust anybody. Anyone in a position of power is going to abuse it. Yeah, that's one of the perks to make laws and then break them yourselves. Perhaps this disgust, this intuitive disgust that we feel, this rage, this anger, is a conscious awareness that something better is possible, that we could aspire to better systems of government, that we could live to a higher standard as individuals, that we could live consensually by rules, respectfully, democratically, that we could support and help one another, that we could have agreements about, hey, should we look after this country? Should we build up the NHS? So we have systems of policing and justice that are fair and representative. Perhaps that's something we could achieve collectively if democracy was localized, if power was something that was present in your life on an everyday basis, real meaningful ability to influence community and to control your own life. Because as long as it's abstracted and filtered through peculiar relationships of convenience and personal benefit, I think you're always going to end up with stories of this nature. The Matt Hancock story tells us more than the particular individuals in government at present are incapable of living to the standards that they expect you and I to live by. It tells us that the system itself is deeply flawed, that we shouldn't be fighting to preserve it or refusing to imagine that there are real alternatives. Look at the scope and scale of challenges we are now facing. Why would you set a frame around those problems that really prevents any meaningful solution being reached? As long as the relationships between people in power governmentally and people in power corporately and international laws, relationships, transnational corporate relationships transcend the power of nations and, more significant than that, of local communities, we're going to continually feel that politics takes place elsewhere. We're going to know in our heart of hearts that they're just ordinary fallible people like you and I that are going to slip up and make mistakes, sometimes mistakes that are pretty unpleasant, sometimes ordinary, everyday mistakes. The thing that really rubs is that this is a time of severe regulation being placed on ordinary people. Another 2 weeks, another month, flatten the curve, and on it goes. Mobilising our natural affection for the NHS and the incredible people that work for that wonderful organisation in order to kind of distract us from the inadequacy, corruption and ineptitude that is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. I'm talking about UK politics because this is a UK political story, but wherever you are in the world, doesn't something about this chime deeply with you about the nature of centralised power and the individuals that occupy posts within these centralised institutions? For me, it's a bigger story than Matt Hancock should resign or we can't trust the British Conservative government. This is an indication of the flaws that this pandemic has brought to the forefront, that we need localised systems of government, that we need to have authority in our own lives, that we need something that resembles a word that we hear every day but is becoming increasingly abstract: democracy. If you like that video, why not like it with a little thumbs up? Subscribe to it if you want, turn on the notification bell and we'll clang in your mind all day and all night. If you enjoy me, and crikey, why wouldn't you, and you're in the UK, there's tickets available for my show, 33, which is happening in 20 venues around the south of England. And if you're nowhere near there, have a look at my Shakespeare live show, Our Little Lives. That's on a platform called Live Now. And my podcast, Under the Skin, which is a regular deep dive chat into subjects such as these, and Above the Noise, my weekly guided meditation that helps me and you cope with this kind of chaos, is available on Luminary, which you can get on Apple wherever you are in the world right now. Comment below. Stay with us.